If you've driven enough in rural America, especially in Midwest states like Illinois, and during November, you know the nuisance deer can be when it comes to vehicle collisions. What if I told you one particular buck was so mammoth, it'd forever be coined the Illinois Roadkill Buck?
Folks, this is not an optical illusion. This week's feature buck really is as big as he looks. He's the Illinois Roadkill from 1965 in Hancock.
So here's the story of the 400+ pound whitetail with a 31-inch outside spread. This buck dates back to the year 1965 on a cold November night when a motorist was traveling from Fort Madison, Iowa, and traveled down Illinois Highway 96 about 2 miles east of the small Mississippi River town called Nauvoo, located in Hancock County, Illinois. Suddenly, a large form came out of the ditch and onto the roadway. For the driver, there was no avoiding the collision, and the impact was signaled by a solid thump. The ginormous buck met its death to a 1962 Chevy pickup truck. Another big buck had met its demise at the front end of a vehicle. Not long afterwards, Illinois Conservation Officer Jim Twitchell was directed to pick up the roadkill deer. Jim and others who saw the deer found themselves unable to believe the size of either the body or the rack. They were enormous. The gentleman who hit the Illinois Roadkill Buck with this truck later sold the giant whitetail to antler collector Dick Idle. Idle would then sell the buck to Dr. John Morgan, who then founded the legendary collection. And then in the 90s, Larry Huffman purchased the collection and the name Legendary Whitetails.
The Illinois Roadkill Buck is truly the most talked about deer of any deer that we take on our tour.
The team has actually had the privilege to see this deer in person, and here's a scoring breakdown from Keith Snyder that owns the historic buck.
My name's Keith Snyder, and I own the North American Monster Whitetail Collection. First of all, I'll talk about some of my favorite heads, and I'll start off with my favorite head. Most people know this deer. It's killed in 1965. And a little town of Nauvoo, Illinois. And this is the Illinois Roadkill. It's the largest framed whitetail most people believe in the world that's ever hit the ground. Most people know the numbers, but I'll go through some of them with you. 31.4 beams. I think it's 29.7 on one side, 31.4 on the other. 31.4 wide. Had this tine growed here, he would have been one of the top typicals of all time. Barely makes Boone and Crockett at 176, but he is absolutely one of the greatest whitetails that's ever lived. Hands down, no doubt about it. 29 change inside. He's as good as they get. 6-inch mass measurements throughout, and his horns are absolutely the greatest quality horns if you're an antler collector like I have been for 30 years. When I turned 16, I called Dick Idle, and Dick Idle said, "No, I don't own it anymore. I parted with the collection, and it's down in Texas." I said, "What was your favorite deer?" Now, this is a guy that had the hole in the horn. He had some of the greatest heads ever, and he said, "You know, the Illinois Roadkill was probably my favorite deer out of my whole collection." And I just knew then, man, that just instilled more into me that I had to have those antlers. So fast forward a few more years, and it left John Morgan, Dr. John Morgan's collection in Texas, and went to a gentleman that we all know as Legendary Whitetails, Larry Huffman. Larry Huffman ended up buying it, the hole in the horn, and he was buying out a few collections, and this was one of the heads. So I call, and I said, "Hey, you know, Larry, how you doing? My name's Keith Snyder, and I thought I had the perfect deal for him. I had collected the Kentucky state record, the number 2, the archery record, the West Virginia state record, and the number 2. And I said, I'm going to trade all 5 of these deer, and I know I can get that Illinois Roadkill. You know, we're talking deer that were in the 240s. Call Larry up, and long story short, he said, "Yeah, I'd be interested in all those state records. That's what I collect." And I said, "Well, I'll trade them all to you for one deer." And he said, "Which one's that?" And I said, "The Illinois Roadkill." He said, "No chance. Out of all the deer I own, that's my favorite deer." Again, it instilled into me just, I got to have that deer. Larry said, "If something happens, that'll be the last deer that leaves my house." You know, we're talking about a guy that had the Jordan, the Breen, you know, the Wayne Bills, some of the greatest heads ever. And to call this his favorite of all those really tells you how special of a head it is.
So all this begs the question, are deer scores overrated? Is the Boone and Crockett scoring method antiquated? Regardless, this deer is truly one of a kind and will forever be known as one of the most impressive deer to walk Earth. Oh, and one last thing. It was peak rut when this buck was hit on the Iowa and Illinois border. Some could wonder if this could have been an Iowa buck that swam across the river. Could you imagine if this buck was coined the Iowa Roadkill Buck? I can't.